You wake up to a cold drop of water hitting you right on the forehead. The coals from last night are down to just a few glowing red dots in the dark. The grass mat underneath you has soaked up the dampness. It is freezing cold and heavy. Right next to you, a child starts to cough. Outside the cave entrance, the creek that was only ankle-deep yesterday is now a roaring, muddy torrent swallowing the trees along its banks. This isn't the first day of rain. It is day 4. You don't know if the sky will clear tomorrow or if this storm is going to grind on for another week. But you know one thing for sure. If this fire dies, if the dry wood runs out, or if your sleeping spot keeps soaking through the entire group, is going to weaken very fast. And in your world, 300,000 years ago, exhaustion can kill you just as quickly as a predator. So what did ancient humans actually do when the sky wouldn't stop raining? Today, a week of non-stop rain usually just means wet streets, clothes taking a little longer to dry, or a few canceled outdoor plans. You sit inside behind sealed glass windows, protected by waterproof roofs, synthetic rain jackets, a refrigerator full of food, electricity, medicine, and weather forecasts warning you hours in advance. For you, rain is just soothing white noise to help you fall asleep on the couch. But ancient humans didn't have a single one of those protective layers. To them, a long rainstorm wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a full-scale assault on survival. Rain soaked the fuel they needed for fire to turn familiar trails into slippery mud-swelled rivers, to cut off migration routes, and forced the entire group to cram themselves into a tiny space for days on end. Yet the more they tried to seal up their shelter from the wind and water, the more they faced a silent, deadly threat, choking on the smoke from the very fire keeping them alive. A prolonged storm attacked 5 core pillars of survival. All at once: shelter, body temperature, sleep, food supply, and mobility. So the real question here isn't simply where they ran to hide from the rain. The real mystery is, how did a group of people maintain a livable space when everything outside the wood, the ground, the plants, and the pathways was steadily saturating with water? Did they just sit completely still in a cave for a week straight? What did they do when smoke started filling their lungs? What did they sleep on when the ground was radiating freezing cold moisture? And if there wasn't a cave anywhere nearby, could they actually build a shelter fast enough before hypothermia set in? To understand that pressure, look at what was actually at stake. Risk number 1. Losing the fire. Fire was everything. Without it, you couldn't cook food, boil water, stay warm, dry out materials, and most importantly, you lost the wall of light keeping predators out in the dark at night. Letting the fire die during a rainstorm was a microscopic catastrophe that could wipe out an entire tribe. Risk number 2. Losing sleep and body heat. A rock overhang might stop water from falling directly on your head, but it is completely useless against the damp, freezing ground underneath you. A wet human body lying on cold dirt loses heat up to 25 times faster than a dry one. Without core warmth and deep sleep, immune systems collapse, reaction times plummet, and judgment fades. Modern studies on hunter-gatherer societies like the Hadza show that grass huts built during the rainy season actually function as microenvironments, dramatically reducing thermal stress compared to sleeping out in the open. Risk number 3. Smoke, insects, and disease. The tighter you seal a shelter to trap heat, the more toxic smoke you trap inside with it. On top of that, old damp bedding materials quickly become breeding grounds for parasites and disease-carrying insects if they aren't managed properly. So what evidence have archaeologists and anthropologists actually uncovered about how our ancestors fought this weather war? Evidence number 1. Caves were strategic nodes in a mental map. When researchers surveyed 113 hunter-gatherer societies, they found that 108 of them used caves or rock shelters. However, not a single one of those societies relied on caves exclusively. Caves were just one part of a much larger, highly organized mobility system. This completely flips how we view prehistoric humans. They weren't just wandering aimlessly through the woods and stumbling into a cave when it started to pour. The elders carried a vivid survival map in their minds. They knew exactly which rock overhang stayed the driest, which angle blocked the prevailing winds, which spots still had dry deadwood protected by the forest canopy, and which caves sat high enough to be completely safe from flash floods. Evidence number 2. They didn't just look for dry ground, they built dry floors. At Sibudu Cave in South Africa, archaeologists discovered layers of plant materials carefully arranged as bedding and living surfaces dating back 77,000 years. Even more remarkable, those layers included leaves from plants with natural insect-repelling chemicals. And going back even further, at Border Cave evidence shows that 200,000 years ago, humans were laying grass over thick beds of ash. The ash absorbed moisture and insulated their bodies from the cold earth. When those bedding layers got dirty, damp, and infested with pests, they didn't just throw them away. They burned them clean, turning the waste into a fresh, sterile layer of ash and laid new grass right on top. A bed wasn't some modern luxury. It was a critical piece of prehistoric survival technology. Evidence number 3. Keeping a fire burning isn't enough. You have to engineer the smoke. Aerodynamic simulations at the Tor Faraj rock shelter in Jordan show that hearth placement is a matter of life and death when it comes to smoke density. During a heavy downpour, human instinct cries out to push the fire deep into the back of the cave to protect it from splashing water. But if you put it too deep, airflow dies. Smoke bounces off the back wall, and it blankets the entire living space until no one can breathe or open their eyes. Ancient humans had to study wind currents and rock geometry, placing their hearths at precise ventilation nodes. Spots where the flame was shielded from the rain, but the smoke was cleanly sucked out into the open air. Evidence number 4. If there wasn't a cave, they built one from scratch. Experimental archaeology proves that building hunter-gatherer structures like brush shelters, bent wood domed huts, or timber frames doesn't require massive labor. It only took humans a few hours to drive stakes into the ground, bend the frames, thatch them with leaves pointing downward to shed water, and dig a tiny drainage trench around the perimeter to channel runoff away. The lack of preserved huts in the archaeological record isn't because they didn't build houses. It's because wood leaves and animal hides decay over thousands of years. When they didn't have rock, they turned the forest into a home. Evidence number 5. Rain completely rewired their daily schedule. When a storm pounded down for a week straight, ancient humans didn't just sit around staring out into the rain. They reorganized their entire workflow. Long-distance, high-risk hunting trips were postponed. The tribe broke down into specialized task groups. Around camp, one team gathered firewood, another foraged for tubers and insects that surfaced after the rain. The downtime spent locked inside a shelter was actually when human technological creativity exploded. Unable to run outside, they sat around the firelight and spent hours chipping flint into sharp tools, twisting plant fibers into strong rope, sewing animal hides into clothing, and grinding pigments to paint on cave walls. Rain didn't slow them down. It gave them the time to prepare for everything that came next. But here's where we hit a twist most people miss. The obvious answer, when it rains, go into a cave, is only half the story. A raw, natural cave is not automatically safe. It can have water pouring directly through the ceiling from groundwater leaks. It can be swallowed whole by a rising creek overnight. Its floor can be radiating freezing damp cold. It might already be occupied by dangerous predators looking for the exact same shelter, and it can easily turn into a giant suffocating smoke chamber. So the biggest truth here is this: ancient humans didn't just passively find a dry spot. They actively engineered one, transforming a raw, damp, hostile environment into a space capable of sustaining human life. To pull that off, they mastered a brilliant engineering concept: microclimate construction. When a week-long storm sets in, an ecological chain reaction begins. The soil gets soggy, deadwood absorbs moisture, the air saturates with humidity, and nighttime temperatures plunge. Instead of waiting around for their bodies to evolve thicker fur or waterproof skin like an otter, humans used their brains to modify their surroundings. They practiced strict spatial zoning. Within just a few square yards, they drew invisible lines: a fire zone, a dry sleeping zone, an elevated storage zone to dry out wood, a food prep zone, and a waste disposal zone far away from the bedding. If you mixed those up, your sleeping spot, rotted fleas multiplied, wood stayed wet, and smoke destroyed everyone's lungs. By building roofs to shed water, insulating floors with ash and grass to block ground, chill, managing airflow, and dividing labor, ancient humans practiced what evolutionary biologists call niche construction. They engineered a warm, dry climate bubble for themselves right in the middle of a soaking, wet wilderness. And that reveals something profound about what it means to be human. No single survival skill or solo genius could carry a tribe through a brutal week-long rainstorm. You needed one person with the muscle to haul dry deadwood from under the forest canopy. You needed another with the patience to carefully lay down clean grass for a shivering child. You needed someone sharp enough to watch the rising creek outside the cave entrance. And you needed an elder with the deep memory to remind the group that on the north side of the hill, there was a higher rock shelter that never flooded. Human survival was never just about sharp stone spears. It was built on collective memory, division of labor, and the empathy to care for the weakest members of the group. A dry grass bed sounds like such a simple thing, but to build one in a soaking wet world required extraordinary teamwork, identifying the right plants, foraging, transporting, layering, and maintaining them. The greatest power of human culture didn't just shine in massive dramatic rituals. It lived in the quietest, most ordinary acts. Keeping a fire alive together, changing a wet sleeping bed, and remembering a mental map to keep each other safe. And that ancient instinct never really left us. Think about the last time the power went out during a major storm. Or when your camping tent started leaking in the middle of the night, soaking your sleeping bags as freezing wind poured in. In that exact moment, the thin veneer of modern civilization peels away, and you immediately default to the exact same ancient priority list your ancestors used 300,000 years ago. Find the driest spot. Create or protect a heat source. Insulate your sleep. Ration your food and water. And pull the people you love close together. The only difference today is that our materials are concrete walls, waterproof tarps, and rechargeable battery banks. But the underlying survival logic hasn't changed at all. The sturdy modern houses we live in today are really just complex, upgraded versions of what our ancestors were laboring to build a small, safe microclimate bubble, so the fragile human body could survive. Long before humans ever figured out how to build storm-proof concrete towers, they learned how to engineer tiny, resilient, dry islands in the wilderness, places where the fire, the sleep, and the people they loved could safely survive the rain.